Hey guys, Sam and Amy Hannon here. So glad to be with you. So glad y'all are doing Merge. What a great decision you've made. I've worked with young couples for a number of years. I'm a pastor here at Fellowship Bible Church. I primarily work at our Rogers campus with our Fellowship Rogers congregation. This is my wife of 25 plus years, Amy Hannon. And I'm glad you're joining us.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here. We've done this before.
Always better when you're with me.
Well, I like to think so.
Yeah. Hey, we're so excited you're doing Merge. You know, I've worked with young couples for a long time doing premarital counseling and that kind of thing. And I have found that most couples invest more time in planning their ceremony and their reception than they actually do working on marriage. Isn't that crazy? This is the most important relationship you'll ever have. And so investing time, preparing for a healthy marriage is a wise decision. So I'm really proud that you are investing time going through Merge. And thank you to all our small group leaders who are serving. We really appreciate you guys. Hey, today's lesson, we're actually going to get 2 for 1 today. We're going to talk about expectations, which is a huge issue in marriage. And then we're going to talk about navigating the merging of 2 families, talk about in-laws as well. So let's start with expectations. Let me start by saying this. I have found that marriage is the most wonderful thing that you'll ever experience. Marriage is really awesome. Don't you think so?
Yes, I think you're great.
Yeah, I was hoping.
Yeah, we have fun. Yes.
I was hoping you were saying that. Marriage is wonderful, and at the same time, marriage is really hard.
Are you gonna ask me to confirm that one too?
Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Marriage, it's a dichotomy. It's wonderful and it's hard all at the same time, and a lot of navigating the hard part of marriage is setting right expectations. So we're going to be following through with our slides today, and you'll also be following through on your handbooks with the fill in the blanks. But an expectation is a belief about the way things should or will be. And so setting right expectations for marriage is really important. So first point I want to bring up is that marriage is not the easy button. That just because you get married, it doesn't mean that everything's gonna work out. Like the movies you watched when you were a kid, at the very end, the characters got married, and then it said what?
They live happily ever after.
They live happily ever after. But what happens is you get married, and then you have to share laundry and a dishwasher and a bathroom. Isn't that interesting?
Yes. I always never understood why Sam Hannon's socks were always laid right beside the hamper and not in it.
Yeah. So much.
So you know what we've done after 25 years?
Yeah, we
have no hampers.
Yeah,
we just make piles on the floor. See?
You have to share
happily
a bank
ever
account.
after. That's how you do it.
You have to share a bank account. You have to share a calendar. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but you're actually getting a roommate when you get married. And I don't know if you've ever had a roommate. Maybe someone who was a really good friend of yours, and then you moved in together, and then when you started sharing things, you didn't get along as well. Hey, that can happen in marriage too. And so just know that getting married is not going to solve all of your problems. But hey, let's hit this first slide, Amy. What can we expect in marriage?
Okay, here are some things that you can expect. You'll be conducting your marriage in a fallen world. Isn't that positive to hear? You're going to be conducting your marriage in a fallen world. It's our situation. You're a sinner who will be married to another sinner. There are some expectations that you will need to die to, and we'll definitely get to that. And the best news of all is that God is faithful in the midst of all of it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that brought us together was that we appreciated each other's strengths, each other's character, Amy's hair, our talents, our gifts, and all that kind of thing. And at the same time, I'm a fallen person who's in the process of being redeemed, and I'm growing in my faith, and you're a fallen person. And at times, we can be selfish, or we can be grumpy, or we can be sinful. And so you just need to know that just because you get married, it doesn't mean that your person that you're marrying is going to end up being perfect the day after the wedding. They still are going to struggle in life. So you're living in a broken world with a broken person. And so you should expect that you're going to have to compromise, you're going to have to give up some of your rights, and you're going to have to figure out how to navigate living together in a broken world with being married to another broken
With
person.
a lot of grace. A lot of grace, don't you think?
It does require that. So repeat after me. You ready? You get what you get.
You get what you get.
Don't throw a fit.
Don't throw a fit.
Yeah, you're choosing to make a commitment.
That's in
to
the Bible.
This person. That's in the Hannon version.
This is the
You're choosing to be married to this person, and there are certain things about your spouse that aren't going to change. And there are certain things that are hardwired in them. Like, for instance, whether they're...
I'm scared when he says for instance. Let's just be honest.
Like,
for instance,
like
what?
maybe as a possibility, your spouse is not a good time manager.
That's fair. I'm not a good time manager.
Yeah. Or maybe you're married to someone who's an introvert and you're an extrovert. Or maybe you're married to someone who's more spontaneous and you like to be really structured. And so you just need to know that as you navigate marriage in a broken world with a broken person, you've got to figure out how to put all this stuff together, and you get what you get.
You don't throw a fit.
Don't throw a fit. You've got to figure out how to work with this person. And the flip side of that is there isn't a more perfect person out there for you. Don't buy into that lie. The other people that you might think, well, what if I married them? They're broken too. Mm-hmm. And so anyone you marry, you're just going to have to figure out how to navigate it. So let's talk expectations.
Okay.
Where do expectations come from? So everybody that's getting married has this picture of what it's going to be like. Where do expectations come from?
Well, they can come from a lot of places, and here's just a list of a few of them. Expectations come from our parents, what we saw them do, how they acted in marriage, how they responded to conflict, things like that. So they come from our parents. The culture around us, what we see, social media, our movies, things like that. Other relationships that have been in our lives definitely contribute to what our expectations are. Ourselves, just how are we wired and what do we think? And then our church background and history also plays a big role in setting expectations.
Yeah, let's work through those, illustrate a few of them. For instance, I grew up really not seeing a marriage. I grew up in a single mom home. So I really had no context coming into marriage of what a mom and a dad look like. And what I do remember, because I was so young when my father passed away, it's very fuzzy, but you came from a home that had a healthy marriage.
Yeah, my mom and dad have a great friendship. They do well in conflict resolution and...
Hey,
we need motion.
That was awesome. We had the lights come on and off.
I know, right? Light bulb moment.
Keep going, no edits.
No edits in a pandemic. Oh shoot, I shouldn't have said that.
So your parents had
I come from a household where my parents are great friends, and they have a healthy marriage, and they serve the Lord, and they serve one another in their household, and they do a great job in just their friendship. And so I have different expectations of just what that looks like in a marriage.
So talk about this. So you brought an expectation into our marriage on me.
I did.
That what would happen if you cooked?
Okay, so at my house growing up, the influence on my expectations that my parents had is that if my mom cooked, my dad usually cleaned. That's just kind of how it was. Like, okay, I did.
And here's the deal. I had never seen a man do anything in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. When my dad was alive, it wasn't his habit, but I had never seen a man wash a dish. Mm-hmm. And so I remember
take out the trash.
First time we went home to your house, when your dad got up and started picking up plates and taking them to sink it.
Yeah.
That blew my mind.
Yeah.
So it was a great model for me.
It was.
But when we started our own home,
that was the no-brainer
after dinner,
for me.
That's what you expected.
Yes, and I mean some expectations I feel like, we think that they are given. Like, this is how it's got to be. And so I didn't communicate it to Sam. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I just expected that that's what it would look like when I did dinner. He would clean up. And so, that was something we had to figure out and maneuver and communicate and get to.
It's a great example.
Mm-hmm.
You also can pick up an expectation from the culture around you. And so whether it's a movie or a television show or even, I think, social media right now is a big influence. You just got to remember on social media that people are controlling the image that they're setting there. And so if you ever look at a couple on social media and you think to yourself, oh, they have the perfect relationship, don't be fooled. We are all broken people doing marriage in a broken world. They're just not putting that broken part on their Instagram or on their social media page. And so you have to be careful maybe idolizing something that's not really there.
Well, and another thing too that I've talked for years about with my married friends and with younger women is this, that movies, especially for men and women, it's marketing. That's a marketing tool by Hollywood. And how do they always make the men look kind and romantic and soft and all of that? And how do they always make the women look super physically interested all the time, ready to go? Can I say that? We can talk about that, right? And so that's how Hollywood is marketing movies, because they want the women to go for these romantic, kind, soft men, and they want the men to be attracted to these women who are, gung-ho all the time. And so I think that's another expectation that has affected a lot of marriages, is women think that men are always going to be what they've seen in movies, and men expect women to be what they've seen in movies. And that is a marketing ploy. It's not necessarily the way that God really wired us down deep.
Yeah. Your relationships, your courtship's not going to be like The Bachelor.
And praise God.
And
Good night.
Your wedding may not be just like the perfect one you saw on Pinterest or Instagram. And so just have to be careful that you don't get an expectation from the culture that's not really there. Also, you can pick up expectation from other relationships in your life, that you may just be observing someone in your life. There may be a couple that you admired growing up in your hometown, and you thought, I always want to be like them. Just know that that may not work out for your relationship.
Or a relationship you've had previously. Like, what are you bringing from prior relationship into your marriage? You have to be sure to, kind of keep that in check as well.
And you can even get an expectation from yourself. There may just be something you've always dreamed of or always valued, and now you're placing that expectation on your future spouse and on y'all's relationship. And you just need to know that it may or may not come to fruition. Remember, you get what you get. Don't throw a fit. There isn't a person out there that's going to meet all of your expectations. And even though I probably am like 99%,
awesome.
Yeah, there's probably 1% that I don't meet your expectations and you don't meet mine. And you just got to learn to figure out how to navigate that. Lastly, your church background or history could influence your expectations. And so you may have a pastor who painted a realistic picture of marriage. Maybe he was vulnerable and shared some struggles that he and his spouse had, or maybe you had a pastor who idealized his marriage and his examples and that kind of thing. Either way, you're coming into this with some sort of an expectation on marriage. So let's talk about what happens when expectations are not met. And so you can see on the diagram that's on this next slide that when you have an expectation that's not met, it can start with sadness, which then can lead to disappointment. Then you can become frustrated, which can lead to anger. And we've seen that pattern.
Where is sighing in the middle of all that?
Yeah.
Because that is my numero uno.
Yeah.
When my expectations aren't met, I can sigh with the best of them.
So I'll give you
Okay.
open forum here.
Okay.
Can you think of a time where you had an expectation, whether spoken or unspoken, that I didn't meet, and then when I didn't meet it, it took you through that cycle: sadness, disappointment, frustration, to anger, and then I didn't know it till I saw the anger.
Yes, and I think yes, I mean, you have them on small scales and you have them on big scales. And really, there are some, there's just a range, and some of it is silly. Some of it is how he loads the dishwasher. Look away. I'm going to make big eyes at everybody. How he loads the dishwasher. It's such a small thing, right? But I can literally go through all of those steps on something so small. I really can, just like you can with some of the things for me.
Like time management.
Time
is
management
something that we've
is
really needed to work on, because I do own a watch, and And I really care about time, and I literally get a little panic attack in me if I'm not going to be somewhere on time, and you're just more carefree and that kind of thing. And early on in our marriage, I just expected Amy to be Sam. I didn't expect her to be Amy. So if Sam values being on time, then Amy values being on time. And so I would do some really rude things, like sit out in the driveway and honk at Amy, or hurry.
He really did that.
Yeah.
Honked
and
at me.
Hurry her.
Not like cute honk. Not like, hurry, honey. Not like that.
Yeah. Or hurry her while she was putting on her makeup and hair, which never helped. It only slowed the process down. Or on our way to somewhere would then express my frustration or anger and say, I can't believe we're going to show up and be late and all that kind of thing. And here's the deal. Remember what I said earlier? You get what you get. Don't throw a fit. Amy is never going to be a person who values being on time. And as much as I try to change her, I'm not going to change her. And so I just have had to learn to adapt to that. And then you've grown a lot.
I was about to say, can I have some props for 1 second? Because
you've done good. You've done good.
We were super on time today.
Yeah.
And you have praised me for being at the airport on time.
She has
Thank you.
been at the airport on time, which, by the way, is 2 hours before a domestic flight. And then I've grown in that, here's my deal. If it's not something that I'm on point for, like if I'm not preaching or I'm not running or coaching the ball team and we're going to be a little late, I just have tried to relax. And here's the phrase I tell myself. We may be a little late, but at least we get to be with Amy. And she's worth being a little late for. And so we just learned to navigate that expectation as opposed to going through that cycle over and over again. Well, here's what can happen. Look at the next slide. Here's what can happen if you don't learn to navigate that. Unmet expectations can lead to disappointment. Disappointment can drag you apart. And the goal of marriage is oneness. God said, let the two become one. And so when you have something that's over and over disappointing and frustrating, you can begin to disconnect, which for some people leads to divorce.
Can I say this?
Managing expectations is a huge issue.
Well, and I think that right now we all have heart eyes for our spouses or for our fiancés and all that stuff. And you hear us say things like, the dishwasher makes you literally become so angry you can't stand it. You think that sounds super unreasonable, and it's the little things over time that are not communicated, that are not processed or dealt with, that really do become huge things. And they get inside there and they can become very ugly and really can ultimately lead to divorce. A lot of people can get divorced simply because they have just disconnected or they feel like they don't understand each other or whatever. It doesn't even have to do with the big ones. So they really do. Expectations are so critical that they're communicated and they're processed and they're dealt with, and that you move toward one another and you let the Lord get in there and and work it all out for your good and His glory, really.
Yeah. Hey, well, let's look at Proverbs 13:12. You want to read that for us?
Proverbs 13:12 says, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life.
Yeah, you can even put the word expectations in there. An expectation that is unmet can make the heart sick, but an expectation fulfilled is life-giving. So we have to learn how to either adjust or communicate our expectations. So here's a progression that's the opposite of unhealth. It's a healthy marriage progression. That you take unmet expectations and use them not as an opportunity to disconnect, but as an opportunity to discover. So here's the weird deal. All of these little frustrating moments that you're going to have in the next year, 2 years, or 5 years are doors that you can go through and learn something about one another. So when your wife or your husband gets frustrated, you've got to navigate that in the short term, but you can also ask the question, what am I learning here about my spouse? And so for instance, let's take the dishwasher thing. Here's what I've learned about Amy. Amy is at peace when things are in order. I'll give you 3 examples. When I do the dishes, which I think is a very sacrificial service.
It's great. I appreciate it.
Yeah. and I throw them all in there. And some of them may have a little food on them and all that kind of thing. And then Amy sees that. It doesn't feel peaceful to her. It doesn't feel servantly to her. It actually makes her more frustrated than having to do them on her own.
True.
She would rather do the dishes on her own than see a dishwasher that's not in order. And so I can argue about the dishes, or I can learn about my spouse. I've also learned that when Amy walks into the living room in the morning, it makes her feel at peace if the
Pillows are all straight on the couch.
Are all straight on the couch. And
Y'all,
they
I
need
feel
a little
like I need to be
V.
medicated.
They need a little V in there. So
Oh, the
just
V.
a little
Y'all know
karate
that,
chop.
a
Yeah, a
little
little
karate
karate
chop.
chop. And when Amy comes home from work, we have a big island in our kitchen. You don't have to clean the whole island. Just the first 3 feet that she sees. If that is clean, she feels at peace. Now,
That's
I
preach.
can make fun of her for
honesty.
those things. I can say, don't feel that way. I can do all that. Or I can learn from our little spats about the pillows or about the countertop or the kitchen that that's just the way God designed Amy. That's the way she is. You get what you get. Don't throw a fit. And so I've just learned to adjust. If she stands over my shoulder and gives me a little on the dishwasher, I just walk away. I used to say, sorry, I'm serving you in such a bad way. And that
doesn't go well,
That
by the way.
doesn't go well. I just go, would you rather do this? And she says, I would. I walk away and go do something else. Karate chop the pillows.
He
clean
has
the
learned to
counter.
karate chop.
Happy wife, happy life.
Well, and I'll even say this. I used to, so what I hope that you're hearing is 25 years in, expectations and the way that we're wired is how over time we've moved toward one another instead of letting these things separate us or disconnect us, because that is that downhill spiral that's so dangerous. Discover. And so for me, does Sam mash all the pillows when he comes to bed after me and forget sometimes? Yes. It is not worth it for me to say anything. It's not worth it for me to pout or sigh or make a thing about it. Does he load the dishwashers with like a whole, pan of lasagna in the dishwasher? Yes, sometimes he does. But I'm not going to say something about it, and we're not going to make it a thing because it's not important. And so I think that's a lot of it too. Is we both figured things out on time and order and whatever are the little things that can become big things, and we figured it out. We've discovered what's important to one another. And both of us, we have let up a little bit on some of our own expectations, and then the other one has worked toward meeting some of those. And that is the teeter-totter intersection of a healthy marriage. You work hard to serve one another and to figure things out and just to do what makes them happy. And you got to be a good roommate and a good friend. And
yeah, that's personal responsibility. So you discover, and then you take personal responsibility, and then you kind of commit to navigating that issue in there. And so, hey, let's move on. There's 3 key problems that come with expectations. One is you can be unaware of expectations that you have for your relationship. 2, your expectations can be unreasonable. Or 3, even if reasonable, expectations can be unspoken. So you may find yourself getting frustrated about something, and then your boyfriend, because you may be not engaged yet, or your fiance is saying, what's wrong? And you don't even know what's wrong. You just know you're upset, and you're even discovering that maybe you expected them to say something, or maybe you were sad and you expected them to know. And you don't even know you have this expectation until y'all have an argument. And so you were unaware that you had that expectation. Guys, that's going to happen a lot in these first couple of years. You are going to discover a lot of these expectations you didn't even know you had until you got married and then projected them onto your spouse. Secondly, you just need to know that your expectations could be unreasonable. Guys, you may have some physical expectations on your spouse that are unreasonable, and y'all are going to have to navigate your sexual relationship. You may have some unreasonable expectations on what spending looks like, or how much time you're going to spend with each family. That one can come into play.
or how much time you're going to get guy time and girl time. Those are big things that once you've been single and all your time has been spent with guys or girls, and you're coming together in a marriage, I know that a lot of people early on have to really maneuver what that looks like too.
Or how much is reasonable to spend on hair.
We're not going to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, those are things that you have to come to a reasonable expectation. Y'all need to have the hair discussion because her parents have been paying for her hair, and guys, you have no idea. It's very expensive. You could get a new fishing rod every time she gets a haircut. Last one would be, if reasonable, some expectations are unspoken. And I think that's the hardest one for me as a guy is I know I'm not doing something right. I know that she's frustrated, but she hasn't told me. And then sometimes she says, I don't want to have to tell you.
And that's
I want
not
my
fair,
Prince
girls.
Charming to know. And
That's not fair. And I'll say this. I'll say two things about this. We have to communicate in grace. Did you hear that? We have to communicate in grace and gentleness, how we feel or what we expect, and doing it in the moment is not the best time. I don't know if y'all have done conflict resolution yet, but that's a great tip is if you're having an unmet expectation, let's talk about it later. Don't talk about it in the moment because that isn't going to be healthy and you're going to end up, because you're angry kind of down in there, it could lead to something that you just really don't want it to become. So you do need to communicate in gentleness and grace what it is that you are hoping for, or hey, could we meet on this, or here's what I was thinking, whatever. And then the other thing too is, and this is what a lot of girls will do, we won't communicate our expectation because we tend to stuff things. We just kind of tend to as females. And then what happens is I think that the enemy gets in our minds and starts to make us think things about our spouse that aren't there. Like we start to think, he doesn't care about me. He doesn't notice me. He doesn't whatever. He doesn't think about me. That's not true. We are so fundamentally different by God's design that it's not that he's not thinking of me. He might think of me in a different way or whatever, but be really careful, ladies, not to let your minds really start to take those unmet expectations, because we're stuffing them. And then when we stuff them, they fester a little bit and they start to make us think things about our spouses that aren't true. We've got to give each other in unmet expectation situations. We have got to give each other the benefit of the doubt. We really do.
yeah, that's a great way to wrap up. Let's look at this last slide. So be aware of what you expect, and you're in a discovery process on that. 2, be reasonable in what you expect. And your relationship is your relationship. You can't compare yourself to others. You guys have to decide what is reasonable. Be open about what you expect. Have good discussions about things, and then be willing to listen to the Lord. I'll close with this. One of the rules that we have discovered that's been helpful in our marriage is take what you're frustrated about, maybe this unmet expectation or this expectation you're passionate about, and put it on a 1 to 10 scale. With 10 being, I can't live without this, it's so important, and 1 being, it's not important at all. And everything under a 7, be willing to negotiate, be willing to compromise on, and be willing to drop. They're just not that important. And so if Amy needs the pillows straightened, no big deal. If Amy needs the dishwasher takeover, no big deal. If Sam needs me to be out at the airport 2 hours early, then I can do that. I've gotten you up at 4 in the morning before.
I've done it, and I'm doing it. We're doing it.
And that kind of thing and stuff. And then on the big things, you might have to navigate that more delicately. But if it's no big deal, then just change your expectation or rise to the occasion to meet your spouse's expectation. Hey, let's take a pause right here. You've got some discussion questions that you can do, and then we'll come back and talk about in-laws. Well, welcome back. Hope you had some good discussion on expectations. We're going to move now into the section on family and in-laws. And this is a unique time for us to teach this because just a few weeks from now, we become in-laws.
We become in-laws.
We are them.
So this is the first time we have taught this multiple times, but never as in-laws.
Yeah.
So
now we have to practice what we preach.
Now we have to practice what we preach.
Yeah, we're going to be held accountable.
I'm telling you.
First point is that you are not just marrying your spouse. You are actually merging 2 family units. And so I didn't just marry Amy. Amy brought with her parents, Larry and Brenda, and her brother, John, and her grandmothers, Una Mae and Catherine. And I brought into the family my mother, Glenda, and my two siblings, Marty and Michael, and their wives. And then eventually everybody had children, and there's nephews and nieces and
the whole circus.
cousins and all that.
It's a whole circus.
And imagine two streams, okay? Two streams coming together. And if you've ever done any canoeing or rafting or kayaking, wherever those two streams come together, there's always what?
Little water ripples.
White water.
Yeah.
There's rapids there because the force of the two streams. And so it's always, there's going to be a little bit of something there. No two families are ever going to merge with perfect peace because we have different personalities and we're all sharing calendar and
Different
values.
expectations. I don't know if you've heard that somewhere before.
And so, guess what? You all bring into the relationship your own baggage. You are stamped with the DNA of your parents. Like, for instance, our in-laws, unfortunately, are Aggie fans.
Oh, they are.
Yeah, so I was talking
Pray for them.
to Scott the other day, and I just told him that our grandchildren will definitely have Razorback onesies.
For
And
sure.
he said, not when they're at my house. So, yeah, we're going to have to navigate that. You're stamped with your parents' DNA. The way they resolve conflict, the way they spend money, the way that they manage their health and diet, and that kind of thing. And you're not just marrying the individual, you're marrying these two families and their values and their communication habits and all of that kind of thing together. And so I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but you're actually bringing two together. Hey, let's look at a scripture. You want to read Genesis 2:24?
I will. Genesis 2:24. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh.
Yeah, so one of the key points in bringing these two families together is that you need to understand that these two families are forming a new family unit. The man leaves his father and mother, becomes united with his wife, and together they form a new family. So you're actually forming a new, and I don't want to use the word independent, but how about the word separate family unit? And I remember the first time I ever realized that we were going independent. I was driving with Amy's dad in the car, and we got married after my senior year.
And in the middle, at Christmas
of
of my senior year in college.
Yeah. So Amy had one more semester of college left, and her family had a college account for her that paid her tuition, paid her housing, and you got a little stipend each month. And so I was driving with her dad, and I said, "Hey, Larry," I said, question, because I'm trying to figure out our budget and stuff. Does Amy's college account still pay for her tuition and stuff next semester? And he didn't even look at me. He was driving. He just said, "She's your wife. I think you ought to pay for it." And I remember sitting in the passenger seat thinking,
So this is getting real.
this is so real. We are
Do
an
I love her that
independent
much?
family unit. Now, they came around. I bet he went home and told Brenda that, and she slapped him around. He came around and said, we're still going to finish paying for Amy's school, but you've got the rest of it. But I remember thinking, okay, we're an independent family unit, and hey, that's about to get real for all of you. Your parents are probably going to sit down and say, "Hey, by the way, here's how much your cell phone costs. Here's how much your insurance costs. Here's, you're no longer getting your money in your account. You need to manage your own affairs." And so you are becoming one unit. And so you and your new spouse are forming a team. And so you've got to learn how to operate with each other. We talked about that earlier with expectations, but now you need to learn how to navigate relationships with your in-laws and your extended family. Here are some things to think about. Next slide. Follow the normal rules of conduct with your parents and in-laws. 2, don't run to your parents or other family members every time you have an issue with your spouse. 3, do not allow your parents or yourself to badmouth your spouse. And so you guys are on the same team. Y'all are a new team. And so as you relate to your parents or your in-laws, just operate on normal protocols. Now, we were talking about this earlier, that sometimes when we're with our parents or our families, we can let our guard down and actually act worse than we would in a normal relationship.
But you want to be sure that your normal rule of conduct would be to honor someone and to give, to speak words that give grace. You don't want to be, you want to honor them with your spouse. Like even when the two of you are talking, you want to be sure that you're being gracious about your in-laws, whichever side. Because, you don't want to say something about your spouse's mom and then your spouse is like, hey, wait a minute, that's my mom. You know what I mean? Like you need to be just really careful, I think. Live above reproach, be very careful with what you say and how you say it to one another about your families and to your families. I think you just need to be really wise and careful about that.
Yeah, and your relationship is your relationship. You need to be real careful about bringing your mom and dad into your conflicts with your spouse. Of course, you want to lean on your mom or seek fatherly advice, but I would be careful about bringing your family members into your conflict. So don't be running to mom. In fact, I'll say it this way.
Let's go strong on this one.
Well, some of you are going to have to break up with your mom or dad because you've formed a codependent relationship with them. And this is a great time to sever that in an appropriate way. Amy has always been really close with her mom, and she didn't stop talking to her mom, but it would be inappropriate for Amy to call her mom every time I didn't load the dishwasher right or didn't karate chop the pillows, or it would be inappropriate for me to call my mom and say, I'm sitting out here in the car, Amy's in there fixing her hair, we're going to be late again, and then my mom to call her and say, hey, you need to hurry up. I've been in the ministry for a long time, believe it or not, that kind of stuff happens. I've even had a mom call me of a 45-year-old man and ask me to call his wife because they were in a fight.
Listen.
No.
Well, and I'll say this, parentheses, as a married couple that we have been called to honor them, you need to be wise, period. Girls, I'm speaking to you. You need to be wise, period, about calling and talking about your marriage or your troubles where you're dishonoring your spouse. I think that there are times we need to be coached or counseled or, hey, we're struggling with this way. I think it really comes from your heart. Like, how are you presenting the situation that y'all are struggling with or you're frustrated with? So be really careful about that. But I would say this, your mom is not the person to talk to. Your parents are not the people to talk to about that. I think that you search for an older, wiser couple that can mentor you, somebody who's a season ahead of you, who can walk, who's walked this road, or that you've seen successfully maneuver some of the things that maybe you're feeling or whatever. Your parents are not the people to call and bring into your marital issues or strife, I would say, for any reason at all.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why is you don't want to sour your parents towards your spouse, which gets to that other point that don't allow your parents to badmouth your spouse, and you don't badmouth your spouse to your parents. Now, let me say this. Some of you may have really wise, awesome, godly parents, like our in-laws that we're merging with our children. They're awesome people. And I would hope that our daughter-in-law would think that about us. You don't want to cut out their godly wisdom. So when we say don't go to them, what we're saying is don't bring them into your conflicts, but definitely you don't want to cut out their godly wisdom.
Like on finances and family planning and a move and parenting. I mean, all that for sure. But we're talking about specifically in your marital relationship. I would keep that with somebody outside of your family. I just think it's a better choice on the whole. You've got plenty of wells of wisdom around you, so I would tap into those.
Hey, let's talk about an appropriate relationship with your parents. And it's not in the notes, but I want you to hear these 4 stages of the parental-child relationship. They all start with C. The first stage is called the command phase. That's from birth to late elementary school. And that's where your parents tell you what to do. Brush your teeth, wear this, go to bed, do your chores, and that kind of thing. The second phase of parenting is called coaching. It starts in late elementary if they're mature, or middle school, and it goes all the way through early college. And that's when the parent's not telling you what to do. They're trying to get you to learn to do it on your own. And at that stage of parenting, they should ask good questions like, do your teeth need brushing? Or is that your breath I smell? Or maybe, do you have homework tonight? Or what time do you need to be up for practice tomorrow? And that kind of thing. And that they're not just telling you what to do, they're trying to coach you to where you can do it on your own. The third stage of parenting is consulting. And that's actually where the child asks the parent to step in and give advice. And that's where we're at with all of our children. And that's where we don't insert ourselves into the process unless asked. And so there's command, then there's coaching, then there's consulting. The last phase is where we're at with our parents, is the cheerleading phase. And that's where our parents don't really speak into anything other than saying, great job. Now, here's why I bring that up. Use those 4 C's. And where you're at in life, you should all either be in consulting or cheerleading. You should only be getting a high degree of input from your parents if you're asking for it. If your parents are still commanding you or coaching you, you need to break up with your mom. And so just know that. Here's why I bring that up. Oftentimes when I'm counseling with couples, this becomes an issue because one or the other one says, I think her or his parents are going to be a problem, and it's because they're commanding, telling the couple what to do, or they're coaching, always inserting their opinion as opposed to cheerleading and consulting. And as we've navigated this, I just want to speak from your parents' side. They're doing it because they love you.
Absolutely.
And it's really hard because we want the best for our kids.
It is hard.
And as much as you want to coach and command, it's hard to sit back and wait to be asked.
It is.
But you may have to sit down with your parents at some point and say, here's what we need from you. We just need you to cheer us on, and we need you to be available for when we need help. You got to quit telling us what to do. We're an independent family unit now.
Well,
and that's hard.
And think about this. That's an expectation that you have, and it circles right back to what we just talked about you need to be able to communicate that. You need to be able to communicate it in grace and gentleness, not in a moment where you've just gotten your feathers ruffled that your mom inserted her opinion into your life. Does that make sense? So you need to do it with a lot of grace, and in a way that you understand that your parents would do anything in the world for you. And they absolutely want what's best for you. And we've walked the road that y'all have walked. And so we have some wisdom on the other side of 25 years that you all don't have yet. And as much as we want to protect you and preserve you from having to make some of the choices or some of the hard things that we've done, and we talk about this all the time, we want to cheer you. We need to be cheering you on and not inserting ourselves in there, but we are just loving you all because we just want what's best for you. And I think another thing too is that I have thought about a lot lately is caring for you is not trying to control you. And I think you know the line in there. Like I'm 48, 7, 8. And my mom will still say, oh, it's cold outside. Do you need a coat? And I'm like, inside of me, I'm like, I don't. I'm old enough to decide if I want a coat. I think that sometimes. She's just caring for me. She can't help it. I will say till my dying day, are you hungry? Can I feed you? Have you eaten?
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands. Like, I can't help that. That is care. I love to care and nurture the people in my life. That is not me trying to control anyone. It's not my mom trying to control me. It's care. So also be in tune to the fact that your parents love you and that there is a line between care and control, and try to pray to be sensitive to those things. But there are families who do try to control. And so that's...
We'll talk about some examples.
Do we? Okay,
yeah.
Yep, we
so
will.
I'll read the scripture. Romans 14:19 says, so then let us pursue what makes for peace and mutual upbuilding. Just try to preserve the peace. And sometimes that may require a hard conversation to get to a new normal in this. But just try to be respectful and honoring of your parents and pursue peace. Here's where it comes. Here's where it shows up. You've got to sit down and communicate about holidays, birthdays, and other big events. It's coming. Who's going to have Christmas with which family? Who's going to be where for Thanksgiving? Who's going to be where for birthdays? Who is going to come visit who on Mother's Day or Father's Day or any other traditions that y'all have? I know for us, we always watch the national championship football game together or maybe other special events. And so y'all need to have a plan. And I just want you to know, nobody's going to be perfectly happy. It's going to be a compromise. It may be that you guys all mutually decide that you're going to be on a rotation We go to their house for Christmas this year, their house for Christmas next year. We do Thanksgiving this year. We get to have one of our vacations with this family this year and that family. And so for us, we got into a rhythm early, and it just seemed to work for the long haul. And we didn't face a lot of conflict with it, but it did require us to sit down and communicate. So that's an assignment for you guys, is that you as a couple need to lead all of these others in what your holidays and birthdays and that kind of thing are going to be. And just remember to try to honor everyone who has an expectation on you, and do good communication. And then another scenario is accepting money and gifts. You want to be careful in your relationship with your in-laws that financial assistance or gifts don't become leverage for the in-laws to manipulate or get from you what you want. And so maybe as an example, for us, I grew up in a family that was, I would say, pretty poor. And Amy's family did very well. And so when we came out into marriage, when we would have my family or go see my mom, we were usually paying for it. Even as 22-year-olds, we would be picking up the tab. And when we would go to Amy's family, it was always the opposite of that. Or Christmas at Amy's house was always a lot of presents for us. And I always felt like I needed to navigate that or apologize to Amy for that. But I never felt like her parents would say, hey, we did give you that vacation, so I think we need Christmas this year. They never did that to us, and I was so appreciative of that. But there are some families out there that may say, hey, live in our rent house, or we're going to give you this car, and then later that comes back around and it's used to say, hey, we did do that for you. So you need to have a no strings attached thing on all that. And I would just encourage you to move to financial independence as quickly as possible. It's okay to accept gifts, but you need to eventually figure out a way to be on your own financially so that never comes into play.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then I think, too, another thing that we go back to about just the relationship with your in-laws is to be aware. I think a lot of that is like there are certain people who are just generous and want to just share with you, and there is no expectation. There is no underlying purpose. We all know when we're being controlled or manipulated. We know that. We know how it feels. We know someone's way. Just be really prayerful and mindful about who you receive from, how you receive, and then, if somebody I don't remember how you said it, but we did this. Well, since we did this, then this. That's cause and effect, and that's not how this works. And especially for in-laws, in-laws should never ever play families against families. Choose us, choose them, or by doing that, you're choosing them and not us. That should never come into play. And if you're sensing that, that is one of those graceful, gentle, but clear conversations that you're going to need to have with that family.
We call those ledger relationships. You don't want to be in a ledger relationship where someone says, because I made a deposit in your life, then you need to make a deposit in my life, whether that's in-laws or anyone. Next point is be realistic and accept reality. And this is about what kind of family merger you're going to have in. And we're a good example of that. Amy's never had a father-in-law. And when she chose to marry me, she knew what she was getting into there. So she's never had another granddad. Our kids only have one granddad. And they probably don't even think that that's strange, but it is the reality of marrying a guy who is raised by a single mom. And also, my mom, bless her heart, hard worker, sweet lady, but she's had issues in her life because of some medical things. And so we've always been the caretakers on my side of the family with my mom, and we've always been the receivers on her family. Now, guess which household it always seems to be easier to go to for a vacation or visits or that kind of thing? We had to make sure we didn't always lean towards this side because it was always so restful and so fun. Well, and this one wasn't always just duty. And so we had to accept the reality of the situation that we have. Amy's never had a mother-in-law that she goes shopping with or goes on trips with or that kind of thing. And so you just need to talk about reality. Maybe one side of the family for you is a non-believing family. And so y'all are never going to sit at the Christmas Eve service together. Or maybe you're married into a blended family. So you're not getting one set of in-laws. You're getting
Four Christmases.
Two sets of in-laws. Yeah, that's a great movie. Watch Four Christmases. That's homework assignment. If you haven't seen that movie. You're getting two sets of in-laws and some half-siblings and that kind of thing. And y'all need to be sensitive to one another and learn to navigate that. Which is a great for point number 7 is choose your attitude rather than blame others for your responses. Should conflict arise in any of these relationships, then man, you've got to own your attitude. In our other marital program called Reengage, we talk about drawing a circle around yourself, and you are responsible for the person in that circle, you. And so in your relationship with your in-laws, even if they may get out of bounds, you stay in bounds and choose your attitude rather than placing blame. James 4:6 says, God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. So be respectful and humble in your relationship with your in-laws. And I love this last point, that your own marriage is what?
Our top priority.
It's Team Sam and Amy. And we love our in-laws and we love our supporting families, but at the end of the day, we are scored on the scoreboard by how this family is advancing and our health. And so I'm her biggest fan, she's my biggest fan, and we're a team together. And thank God we've got great in-laws all around, and great in-laws coming into our family that we're really excited about, even though they're Aggies, that we can partner with. And so God brought you together. The two came together and made one flesh, one unit, and you've got to fight for that unit. And if anything comes in to threaten that, you've got to negotiate those threats. And so be a team together.
And honor God and honor each other and honor your parents.
Yeah.
Right?
Hey guys, thanks for letting us hang out with you guys. We love being married. It's one of my,
we
one
do.
Of my favorite things. And so we don't just teach this stuff. We're trying to live it out too. We're struggling through it too. But I like being married to you. Thanks for hanging out with me.
Love ya.
Hey, y'all have great discussion questions. And thanks for letting us be with you.